Believe, boy, in just over a week, weed will finally be legal in Oregon. So the state treasurer is setting marijuana businesses up for somewhat of a banking success.
Because it's a cash-only business right now, because banks are worried they could face federal backlash if they work with legitimate pot shops. It's really interesting. Tim Becker has more on Oregon's hope to change all that, right, Tim?
Yeah, I visited with State Treasurer Ted Wheeler today, and he's extremely concerned about several things with the all-cash business model, public safety being number one. That's part of why he recently sent a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury back in Washington, D.C.
Check that one out.
This is not an issue that impacts Oregon alone. This impacts the other states that have already chosen to legalize marijuana, including Colorado and Washington.
The cash and carry legal weed business brings in millions of dollars, but
I don't know why somebody would want to do that to him.
it can also bring a trail of crime and violence. This double murder in April tied to a legal medical marijuana operation in southeast Portland. In May, this Arizona dispensary is held up at gunpoint. The employees tied up as thieves make off with a stash of pot and cash. Scenes like this are what State Treasurer Ted Wheeler tells me he wants to minimize in Oregon.
I don't want to see a Wild West scenario where you have high volume cash businesses carting cash through our neighborhoods under armed guard. I'd rather that they instead have normalized banking relationships like any other business.
That's why he sent this letter to the U.S. Treasury Department, asking it to create and clarify guidelines for commercial banks so state-sanctioned marijuana businesses can have access to them and not have to operate in high volumes of cash. It'll benefit the state also.
If it's an all-cash business, it makes it very difficult to track the accounting. It makes it difficult for the state to be able to regulate it, and it makes it very difficult for the state to be able to tax marijuana proceeds.
Right now, banks shun the industry to avoid conflict with federal banking regulators and possibly losing access to their FDIC deposit insurance. Despite that,
we saw a huge need by that industry for just general banking services.
the CEO of Gresham-based M-Bank tells me they opened about 100 accounts for legal marijuana operations last year. Limited by federal guidelines, they stopped the service 9 months later.
This is considered a high-risk industry and a high-risk business. And it looked like at some level the amount of work that we were doing was not going to be adequate to kind of meet the expectations from a compliance standpoint.
So Jeff Baker with M-Bank there tells me they had to make quarterly visits to their clients to make sure that they're sticking to the marijuana guidelines that came down from the feds. It's called the Cole Memorandum. Things like not selling to minors and not transporting over state lines. And the federal government wanted to see this. It just cost too much money and wasn't financially feasible for them to do. So they had to exit the marijuana business.
What Ted Wheeler absolutely makes sense. You don't want a business having to have large volumes of cash and go around, but the banks need assurances that they're not going to be punished.
They're not going to be punished because remember, marijuana is still illegal to the federal government.
Well, and on top of that, so it doesn't turn into the Wild West.
Exactly.
I mean, that's kind of scary.
It is.
Boy, a lot to follow as we move
and we
forward
will.
with this.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.